Thank you. It's fantastic to be here. When merging media calls, I answer because there is an incredible quality to not just the presentation, but the way that the presentation is communicated to the outside world. And I love you guys, and I want to talk to you. But it's nice to know that waves will rush out of here and strike the rest of Canada as well as the rest of the world. That's my Twitter feed. Let's trend today, in Vancouver at least. At Jeff_Gomez. Please remember the underscore because there is another Jeff Gomez, and he's not very happy with me. I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes, and I'm going to leave some time for questions. Let me have it. Challenge me, talk to me about what it is that I may not have covered, because there's so much to talk about and so little time. What I'm really talking about is art, message, and essence in the age of pervasive communications. Some of you may have heard that I had a difficult time as a kid growing up. I was dealing with a situation of economic strife, 1960s New York City. I was born with a facial paralysis, which got me picked on a whole lot. And on top of all that, I was a dreamy Puerto Rican Jew with very long hair in an environment that did not tolerate any of that. How did I keep from getting clobbered every day? Well, I got clobbered every day. But eventually, I started thinking about the fact that that I was getting angry about the situation, that there was a great stress and tension walking into room after room and having to wonder whether I was going to be bullied, whether somebody was going to make some kind of nasty comment about my smile, and so forth. And you know, the ability to understand story and somehow apply story to my own life gave me a little bit the answers that I was looking for. And that is that what I wished for myself, I wondered whether these guys who were doing this, sometimes a few girls, and that was really a mess for me, but whether they felt the same way that I did. I was pissed. I just didn't hit people, and certainly they were pissed. So I wondered if all that really was necessary was a little listening. I sure wanted to be heard. I wasn't heard. So what if I made the first move and listened? Everyone, it turns out, wants to be heard. And that is the essence of what we're talking about today. Who am I? I'm the CEO of Starlight Runner Entertainment. In the past decade or so, somehow we have been able to realize a little bit of a dream of mine. When I was a kid, I loved drawing, but wasn't great at it. I loved writing, but I was a very slow writer. I am to this day. I loved all these different media, but I was restless and couldn't settle on one. Lo and behold, I discover from Japan the mangaka, the writer and sometimes artist of Japanese comic strips, who was so beloved in Japan that their concepts, their stories, the worlds that they invented would be extended across all these different media. There would be the comic, And what was fascinating was that the movie, sometimes it adapted the comic, and sometimes it was a sequel or prequel to the comic book. The TV series would cover some different aspect of the heroes' lives or some different aspect of the story world. Even the toys, when I would get my Japanese friends to translate the text on the toy packaging, would add something to the verisimilitude, the reality of this story world. That was absolutely fascinating to me, and the fact that there was a place where somebody could do this, that was mind-blowing. It was 1975. Nobody was going to understand that, from Hawaii on east for at least 5 or 6 years, and even then, it was only for one thing: Star Wars. I had a long uphill battle. But it was a battle that, as I acquired the language for it, began to be realized. Look, people, I've done the basics of transmedia many times, and I'm so thrilled that I think that in this room, I don't have to get into too much defining and 101 kind of stuff. Thank you. And since that time, where I had to somehow describe what was in my head, look what has happened. These companies are clients of Starlight Runner Entertainment. These companies are engaging in what we at the company call transmedia practice. They are thinking about story worlds, and they are working, sometimes dysfunctionally, to extend these story worlds across multiple media platforms in ways that are at least somewhat organic and not repetitive. Yes, every single company is telling stories and repeating those stories on different platforms. They want to sell the DVD, and some of their material is based on a novel, and so there's an echo, there's some repeat. But the projects that we've done for these companies don't do that. They are spreading story. They are nurturing the story world. And in some cases, they are helping to transform the way some of these companies are doing business so that the core ethos of transmedia storytelling is actually being realized. So 5 or 7 years ago, when I was talking to people just like you, I was theorizing. Not so much anymore, which is wonderful. My company, the tagline is sort of the fact that we maximize the value of our clients' brands and intellectual properties by, number one, fundamentally understanding what they are, and then helping to clarify the message and vastly expand the story world, the narrative that's built around the brand or that is the brand. And guys, I have to apologize in advance. I'm going to be using some marketing language mixed in with my talk of stories and story universes and things like that, simply because this is the language that my clients understand. And I know it's a little bit different in Canada, and I thank you for that, that we don't have to speak in this kind of Madison Avenue talk. But I don't have the time to come up with an entirely new vocabulary, so you just forgive me and go with it. You know what I'm talking about, essentially. The skill set that's in my company also helps to align different stakeholders. That's people who have an investment in the intellectual property behind strategies that stretch past 30 seconds, or even a season of television or a series on the web. And in fact, after that, we help them how exactly narrative plays to different effect on different media platforms. So we do this for entertainment story worlds, as you heard, like Pandora from Avatar, or the universe of Halo for Microsoft. We also work with major consumer brands like Coca-Cola, and you saw before there's Pepperidge Farm. A fascinating aspect of what I do, and we can talk about this later at some point, is the work that we're doing for the United States government and the governments of other countries, as well as non-government organizations, using transmedia to connect people, to get people who otherwise wouldn't be able to tell their stories to the rest of the world and have those stories listened to. Again, the power of listening foments peace, or at least keeps me from bloody noses. And soon our own stuff, which is very exciting, and it's going to be happening. Now, especially in recent years, but dating back essentially to our very beginning, Canada has been a friend to Starlight Runner Entertainment. In fact, Canada seems, at least from our side of the border, to be listening, and that is that's made it wonderful. When we worked with Mainframe Entertainment some years ago on Hot Wheels for Mattel, they understood intrinsically our sensibility that we were describing a universe only a fraction of which would wind up in these animated episodes that eventually found their way to Cartoon Network. They liked the idea that these characters could drive out of an episode and into a video game and have different adventures there, or characters be introduced in a comic book packaged with the cars, and then jump from that comic book narrative into the storyline of the animated episodes. Now, some of you may think that that's really nerdy. What geeks! But I want to remind you that the whole young world of the digital age is nerdy, in that they want continuity, they want a feeling of integrity to the worlds that they're interested in. If you ask a kid questions about Phineas and Ferb or any of the stuff that they're into, they know the answers. And in fact, if you get it wrong, they will correct you. They like integrity because the worlds of their fiction are only better when they make some sort of sense, as the world of their reality hopefully does. So, Hot Wheels, Todd and the Book of Pure Evil. That was fun. Helping the Aircraft Pictures guys understand that a base mythology for their story world would help to create a sense of longevity and progress to even a silly, supernatural, crazy storyline. I was introduced to Vancouver through my work on Tron Legacy, working in the Canadian Motion Picture Park. It was just fantastic and wonderful to be on a project of that size here. Later on, we'll be talking about Battle Castle, which was a documentary series. So you can see we're working on things that aren't just colossal blockbusters. The thing that intrigues us at Starlight Runner and seems to intrigue a lot of people in this space is the ability to tell the story across multiple platforms, not just the fact that it's some big tentpole for Hollywood. And finally, near and dear to my heart, Hero Dogs of 9/11 aired on Animal Planet Canada. We did this with Kellen Content here in Canada, and the ratings were fantastic that night. And getting to work on something across multiple platforms that rang true to our very birth, because Starlight Runner was born in late 2000 and almost immediately ran into one of the biggest challenges of our lives in September of 2001. It just was very cathartic to do that with you guys here in Canada. So it's not just Hollywood. Pervasive communication. Everyone is kind of a broadcaster. We are hyper-connected people, and according to Alan Berkson of the Intelligence Group, there is a true paradigm shift that is creating multiple waves of kind of chaos. How do we continue to get people to hear our messages, to listen to our stories? How do we cut through all the noise when choice is certainly taking favor with the audience? There needs to be a new set of techniques, a new language to allow us to kind of surf these choppy waves and to navigate this new communication paradigm. The belief, as far as we're concerned, and I think a lot of you in this room agree, is that digital and traditional platforms can be leveraged in concert to build relationships with mass audiences and communicate and get your story across. We call this transmedia narrative. The ability to develop, design, produce, and roll out story in such a way that it is leveraging these different platforms in concert, and it's listening. It's listening. All right? So we are seeing the rise of this practice, and what I want to talk about for a little while is where I think we're scoring well, and where I think maybe we should reconsider. And I'm naming names. To sum it all up, you have to be, to a certain degree, at the start of your endeavor, platform agnostic. You cannot confuse this practice with being a technologist alone, or being driven by the technological platform alone. The world, the characters, your message has to be considered first. A depth, a history to the narrative that you're creating, or yourself or your brand, is required first. Once you understand this, you have to determine to stick to it as it starts to move across these platforms. This isn't, although transmedia sometimes takes advantage of the collector's mentality, this isn't a scavenger hunt. I think all of us are past the time where we're planting little things on different media platforms, or forcing someone to chase across platforms or through real life to collect the pieces of something and win the game, so to speak. I think we got through that after 8-bit or 16-bit. So each piece of your narrative, each incarnation or extension of it, needs to feel whole and satisfying in and of itself. It can then give the audience member a direction with regard to how to pursue the other pieces of the story world. So, technology in the chase ought never to rule over story. Okay? Now, That doesn't mean that there aren't new technological innovations that are helping us with multi-platform narrative. Our friends over at Fourth Wall are inventing something called Rides, which is a content management system that conveys some of the ethos of transmedia and can be engaging. There's a new system called Galahad that does something similar and allows for the contribution of video into the narrative by the audience, which is really cool. So if I were to give Fourth Wall some advice, it would be to make certain that the stories that they have to tell, that they are inserting into this new technology, which can be fabulous, it needs to encourage us to do this little bit of extra work in moving from one platform to the next. Now, what does that? Ghoulishness, horror, very dark themes and things that aren't terribly inspirational or aspirational, not so much, you know, because then you're hooked on the hook and not on the an adoration for the characters or the rush of the story. You're not as likely to do the work. And so what I would ask of anyone who is considering creating one of these implementations, it would be to remember the basic tenets of good storytelling. You need to engage your audience with something that they like, something that they're siding with. A character, a concept that is appealing to our better nature. The other odd trend that I'm seeing in that now these ones that I'm showing you right now, they're actually a transmedia implementations that are anchored by web series. So a lot of you here are digital natives who aren't even working on television or feature films. So I think this is particularly pertinent, even if it's not, what you're doing is not genre. In these instances, Daybreak by Tim Crean, Electric City, which Tom Hanks was ushering through. These are multi-million-dollar implementations that are on the front page of Yahoo when they break and so forth. H Plus by Brian Singer and Anthony Zwieker's Cybergeddon. If anybody knows anything about any of these, they're tech negative. Each and every one of them are telling us that if we mess with technology, we're going to die. And that can be fun. I mean, I'm the first person to adore the Terminator films or the Matrix and so forth. But gee, you know, we're using multiple media platforms, technology, which is beloved by the generation rising right now. They like technology. And we're telling them it's bad and supremely dangerous and so forth. When it's well done, like I said, that's great. But what I'd like us to think about is, are there different ways to approach themes that involve technology? I think there's a hunger, and this is based on research that my company does. My company has to track fandom, audiences, and trends globally all the time. We have to be right, and we are about this. Young people growing up in the digital age want to see themes that are tech positive. They want affirmation for what it is that they're doing, not condemnation. Okay? So, if we don't fall in love with these characters, we will not care to do the work of learning about their world or following their adventures across multiple media platforms, no matter how cool the technology. Stop with the douchebags. You know, that works if you're in a movie theater for 2 hours watching a bunch of men having a bachelor party. But I don't know that we want to follow these guys across multiple media platforms over the course of months or years. Okay, so here's the heart of the matter. Know your brand essence, okay? There are attributes that distinguish who you are, what your story world is about, from other implementations that could be like you. In America, we call them competitors. In Canada, not so much. At least that's our impression of you guys. These things, these attributes are what your audience is going to connect with when they come into contact with your content or your product, okay? So you've got to know what it is, and that sometimes takes a little soul searching. That takes a little bit of listening to what's in your own heart about what it is that you're doing. What is my brand or story world giving to the audience? What question does it answer in a positive way? Okay? It's shocking how many scripts, for some reason they think that we take in scripts at Starlight Runner. We don't, so don't. But we get tons of those in, tons of transmedia endeavors and young people who have these story worlds, and they're giving them to us. And by the way, we also get a whole lot of stuff from Hollywood. And so much of all of it, not just the stuff that's coming from recent college grads, but stuff that's coming from the studios. When we ask these people, what are you trying to say? They can't answer the question. You know, what are you conveying here? What is this giving to me? Well, it's based on a cool concept. And no, guys, you need to define this. You need to understand what you're talking about underneath the gimmick or the twist in the concept and so forth. And it has to be clearly defined in your hearts. You don't have to necessarily have it defined on the paper or in the production, because that's on the nose and people get annoyed with cliche and so forth. But internally, your team and the stakeholders do need to understand why this thing is of value. So to put a finer point on it, there's theme. We use at Starlight Runner the word aspirational, which I don't even think is in the dictionary. But to aspire is the best possible result of being inspired. When you talk and inspire people, that's really cool, and I appreciate that, and that's something, a gift that you're giving to the world. But to aspire is the thing that you're looking for as a result, because that is something that comes from inside of you that causes you to take action, that causes you to want to leave Avatar and start thinking about how you can make this world a little bit of a better place because of how inspired you were by the movie. This is the heart of what creates a connection between an audience and a brand. This is story, but it is also intimacy, because when we are inspired, it feels like our inner thoughts and feelings are being heard. And when we're listened to, it causes us sometimes to act in a kind of cool way. Think about the fact that your project might have an aspirational message that, if adhered to, would improve the quality of life for the human race. A lot of what your brand essence is archetype. I know this sounds like a kind of Robert McKee speech in the middle of a high-tech conference, but stay with me. How does your hero, your brand, ring a primal chord in the hearts of audiences? Guys, I get this. I know that we love our gadgets, but again, nothing is going to cause us to listen to you enough to go from one gadget to the next, to keep our attention in the realm that you're creating, unless you're touching me in some way. It's what Apple does. It's what Star Wars does. Think about the fundamental elements of your brand and infuse those elements into every iteration of your story world, all content, all advertising, everything. There's much less guesswork about whether or not a piece of what it is that you have to say is any good, because it is bolstered by the skeleton, the infrastructure that is built of the essence of your brand. This is something that you're going to be seeing more and more of in even apps and things like that. These small elements are going to help to tell the story, but it's not just two dudes hitting each other with light sticks as Star Wars. It is the fact that if it's any good, it's going to be about the primal balance of dark and light within ourselves that needs to be restored before we can restore balance to the rest of our world. If you see that in any little piece of Star Wars, even an app, it feels Star Wars-y. And that's what keeps you there, not just the special effects. Transmedia is being used on projects like Prometheus. The only problem there was that the people building the fantastic run-up to the film didn't connect as much with the film itself because they weren't put in touch with the creators of Prometheus. Not the director, not the producers, not the screenwriter. They got the script and built a fantastic transmedia implementation that got a lot of people excited. But then when we went to see the movie, it was a little bit different. It didn't achieve the expectations that were built on what it is that we were led to think about it. So, the connection, you get the point, the connection needs to be made in order for us to work together. And what it is that I'm calling for here in this room, and I've already called for it in Hollywood at Story World, is for creators, the people who are doing this practice here in this room, need to become a vital part of the team from the very beginning, from the get-go, okay? You need to be in on the concept. You need to be involved with the top executives who are making decisions, and most importantly, you need to become intimate with the creative visionaries. Or if you are the creative visionary, you need to make those relationships and build those relationships with the rest of the people involved. I know we're running a little late. Will I be able to take just a couple of questions?
5 minutes questions.
5 minutes of questions. Okay. guys. Sorry about that, but let's go. And by the way, I'll make myself available over the next couple of days. Just come up to me. No problem. So questions, guys?
Just put up your hand.
Thanks. Oh, okay. Hi, Jeff. You mentioned before the concept of the chase. Can you just talk about the importance of the chase and what you see as being important elements of that?
Yeah, I mean, the feeling of the chase is vital, but the thing, your job is to make the running fun, is to make the pursuit of different pieces of the story world feel like it's worth it. The chase happens. I'm going to go after different pieces of my favorite story world. I'm going to buy the next iPhone because there is a mechanism in there that is telling me that the acquisition of these pieces is going to give me the charge that I got out of the original piece somehow. It has to be an important part of the story. It can't be just some sidelight that nobody really cares about. It has to enlighten me and perhaps throw into a different perspective everything else about the story world. So you need to be clever when building this sort of thing, but you're also kind of preying on the collector's mentality. I love this thing, I want more of it, and when I get more of it, it's going to be cool. Do you understand?
You've given some examples of unsuccessful campaigns and products. Could you kindly give some of your favorite examples of successful campaigns that have engaged the audience and done a great job?
Absolutely. I loved what was done around Hunger Games, because what the decision there was that they were not going to repeat the Twilight pattern. Hunger Games, they realized very early, had the potential to draw in a male audience. And so the transmedia, the multi-platform extensions of Hunger Games before the movie came out, introduced people to this fascinating story world, and allocated people to different aspects of that kind of bizarre society. They also emphasized the aspirational aspects of Katniss Everdeen's character, so that when you looked at her, you didn't see a girl who was trying to decide between two boys. You saw a girl who was standing in defense of her family, a girl who was up against a draconian society. Any person in the world can identify with that, and that brought boys to the movie theater for Hunger Games. And that's just one of many excellent transmedia implementations we've seen this past year.
Sorry, awkward. I just wanted to know, in terms of how much in advance do you have to connect with the brand partners? You know, if you're working with Disney, how far in advance, do you have to test out the story world with them? Because that's quite complicated relationships that you're managing as you build that story world.
What's so wonderful is that we're hearing that the position of transmedia producer is on the rise. Some people don't call themselves exactly that, but the skill set that's involved in managing that is becoming a more and more amazing and prevalent position. We are going to cultivate transmedia producers at the Made in New York Media Center in Brooklyn starting next May. These will be dozens of people who will have the skill set to be brought in very early in a project's concept, and not be the director of the movie, not be the brand manager in the corporation or the marketing director, but be the person who fundamentally is made to understand, defend, and protect the story world and its integrity, and see to it that the relationships move through a kind of clearinghouse or hub that is manned by the Transmedia Producer, so that we can share assets, so that we can communicate clearly about the continuity and the canon of the story world, as well as about the business of the story world that allows for it to proliferate. So, so yes, not only are there people who are being trained to do exactly this, but the companies in the United States, particularly some of the studios that I pointed out before, and what we're recognizing in Canada is that this is also happening, where these people are being brought in very, very early and are being relied upon by more and more people. It's great news. And by the way, I'm on the board of advisors of this facility, this Transmedia Incubator. It's the first of its kind in the world, and my intention is to make this model transparent, okay? So I'm going to give this model to sister cities for implementation around the world, and we're building a curriculum for the training of transmedia producers and transmedia storytellers that we will also, at some point, give away. Okay, well, thank you, guys.